I want to talk to you this morning about this really beautiful exhibition upstairs, Poussin and Nature. I'm going to break normal habit where I would speak more informally. I discovered that there were so many things I wanted to say, and that the temptation to drone on for a very long time was so great that it required me actually sitting down and writing something to make sure that I stayed within our time frame. I did want to say what a pleasure it has been to work with everybody who had a number of things to do. I've worked with technicians from the Prints and Drawings Department, from Lehman, with our own technicians, with wonderful people from Design, Mike Baptiste and Sophia Geronimus, and Eileen Chuk, who did an incredible job in the registrar's office, and Taylor Miller was quite extraordinary. But this is always the case, and I don't want to spend the time here thanking everybody. I want to start right in with this extraordinary painter, and with this fantastic painting, the self-portrait by Poussin, an extraordinary loan or catalogue for the exhibition that was negotiated about a month and a half, 2 months before the exhibition opened, and was most generously given to us. It was one of the bonuses, I would say, of having as our guest curator Pierre Rosenberg, the ex-director of the Louvre, without whom this exhibition would simply not have taken place. And I want to begin by taking you back to 1664. This is 2 years before Poussin died, to the house of the young Duc de Richelieu. This is the grandnephew of the famous Cardinal Richelieu, such an important political figure in the centralization of the monarchy in 17th century France. We have a gathering of art lovers and of the major painters in Paris who have come to examine and discuss 4 paintings that Poussin has sent from Rome. He has been working on them for 2 years. This was a common occurrence. Poussin's paintings were an artistic event each time they arrived from Rome. In this case, depictions of the 4 seasons. We have no idea how this commission originated, who it was who conceived the idea of a cycle of the seasons, and particularly of a cycle such as this, which is not a simple labors of the month, but an allegorical cycle. The works became Poussin's artistic testament, and they also became immediately the gold standard of landscape painting for the next 2 centuries in France. They combine, as I say, the depictions of the 4 seasons, spring, summer, autumn, and winter, and they combine them with the 4 times of day: morning for spring, afternoon for summer, evening for autumn, night for winter. They also depict climatic changes, and of course the storm seen in the flood is perhaps the most extraordinary. And rather than show simply activities associated with the month, as in our painting by Bruegel of harvesters, they show harvesting in terms of a biblical story, giving to the picture a moral dimension. For example, summer shows the Moabite widow, Ruth, asking permission to glean in the fields of Boaz, a kinsman of her former husband. Ruth eventually will marry Boaz, and from their marriage can be traced the lineage of both David and Christ. So that the cycle is a cycle of the seasons, times of day, explorations of weather, climatic traditions, cycles of nature, cycles of life, cycle of redemption. We're assured by one of those in attendance at the arrival of these paintings that the discussions of them were both long and knowledgeable. Charles Lebrun, the official painter to Louis XIV, and Sébastien Bourdon, we know, both stood up in front of a painting and gave their views. Lebrun lavished praise on summer, whereas Bourdon felt that the palm went to spring, and we're told that he would not be convinced otherwise. Spring, of course, shows Adam and Eve just before the fall. God is flying over the garden, admiring his handiwork. Eve is pointing up to the tree. There is, however, no serpent. She has not yet been tempted. This tree is a citrus tree, another citrus tree here, and these relate to a treatise that another patron of Poussin's, Curatorial Pozzo, had written on the cultivation of citrus in the natural sciences. Just a year following their arrival in Paris, A tennis match was arranged between the young Duc de Richelieu and the 27-year-old Louis XIV. There's every reason to think that the tennis match outcome was arranged because Louis XIV won, and he took as his prize all 13 Poussins that the young Duc de Richelieu had amassed. The young Duke did get a generous sum of money in partial compensation for the loss, and I have to say that we all are beneficiaries, since after the Revolution, all of the Poussins were nationalized and are now in the Louvre. Indeed, one of the reasons that these pictures are in such extraordinary condition is that they've been in the same place since 2 years after they were painted. We know that in 1802, following a armistice during the Napoleonic Wars, Turner crossed the Channel and studied the seasons with care. Géricault made a copy of Winter, and this is Poussin's great painting of Winter. And it was following repeated visits to the Louvre that Cézanne conceived his famous ambition of doing Poussin over again from nature. And I just want to show this detail of a painting. It's not one of the seasons. It's another painting from Montreal by Poussin alongside Cézanne landscape with Mont Saint-Victoire, to give you an idea of how important Poussin was to Cézanne, not simply in his vision of an ennobled nature, but in the ways in which he paints the plains in these juxtaposed areas of color. In short, these paintings are essential to any history of Western art. Indeed, no less a landscape painter than Constable, declared Winter to be one of the 4 defining works of Western landscape painting. Well, I'm happy to say that spring and summer have been lent to the exhibition upstairs, and like Charles Lebrun and Sébastien Bourdon, you have the privilege of disputing their relative merits in front of the works themselves. I would have loved to have had all 4, but from the outset I knew this would be impossible, given their canonical status they have not just for French painting, but for Western art. We had the 2 that were deemed lendable. It was for me a moment of really great excitement when the summer was unpacked and taken to be examined. The figure on the right is Stéphane Loire, my colleague at the Louvre, who is here seen with Dorothy Mann examining the picture prior to hanging it up in the last gallery. In textbooks, we encounter Poussin not as one of the supreme masters of landscape, but of history painting. Now, we all know that practically every New York student given an art assignment has to write on the abduction of the Sabine women, not on our great painting of Blind Orion searching for the rising sun. And that's precisely why I think one of the reasons that this exhibition is so important, for there's no history of Western landscape painting without Poussin. Even someone like Courbet, who represents the reverse side of the coin of French painting, could not avoid his long shadow, except, of course, by taking the opposite course, by throwing over the whole tradition of French painting Poussin stood for. For many viewers today, French painting, I think, is synonymous with Impressionism and early 20th century modernism. But for more than 2 centuries, Poussin was viewed as the essential, indeed the defining artist, against whose achievement virtually every other painter measured his. When that greatest of 18th century critics, Denis Diderot, attended the Salon of 1767 and viewed the work of the most accomplished landscape painter of the day, Joseph Vernet, the meter he applied was Poussin, and Vernet was found lacking. The picture that seemed to him to epitomize what an artist should try to achieve is the astonishing landscape with a man killed by a snake. It too hangs upstairs alongside the work that was probably conceived as its pendant.